Usually when we talk about like a medical diagnosis, there's this really comforting expectation of precision.
Right, yeah. It feels like engineering.
Exactly. Like if you fall off a ladder and break your arm, you go to the hospital, the doctor throws you on an x-ray machine, and, a few minutes later, you are looking at a screen.
And there is just a jagged white line across the bone.
Yeah, it's binary. It is broken or it is not broken. You don't debate the x-ray. You don't sit there and discuss the sociological implications of the fracture. You just set the bone.
It is incredibly comforting. I mean, as a species, we desperately want human behavior to work the exact same way.
Right.
We want to be able to categorize our relationships or our social structures and like our legal disputes with that same level of just visible, undeniable clarity.
But if you have spent literally any time navigating the modern dating market, or honestly worse, if you have been dragged through the meat grinder of modern divorce courts, you already know that the x-ray machine is fundamentally broken.
Oh, completely shattered.
When we step into the landscape of evolutionary psychology, relationship dynamics, and family law, all that clarity just vanishes. We are suddenly dealing with a diagnostic landscape that is, well, it's incredibly murky, it's highly adversarial, and, depending on who you ask, completely rigged.
Yeah, and today we are taking you, our listener, straight into the deepest, darkest end of those murky waters.
We really are. We are looking at a highly requested, deeply controversial, and just utterly unapologetic new ebook. It's titled She's Not Yours: Rational Strategies to Stop Her Hypergamic Escalation by Conrad Reicher.
And it is intense.
It is. Now, before we even start unpacking this, I want to urgently remind you to like and subscribe to this deep dive. If you want to follow along and really grasp the strategies we are about to dissect, you need to check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books to buy the ebook for yourself today.
Highly recommend having the text in front of you for this one.
Definitely. Also, make sure you are following the author at Conrad Reicher at Substack.
Because, I mean, it is a text that absolutely requires a meticulous breakdown. Even just looking at the subtitle, Rational Strategies to Stop Her Hypergamic Escalation, you know exactly what kind of tactical field manual you are opening here.
Yeah, Reicher does not soften his blows.
He really doesn't.
And I want to establish our mission parameters for this deep dive right out of the gate. We know that many of you listening are already deeply engaged in the men's rights and red-pilled manosphere spaces.
Right. You guys are already intimately familiar with concepts like hypergamy and the dual sexual strategy.
But what makes Reicher's book stand out is how he weaponizes that baseline knowledge. He argues that modern institutions haven't just passively evolved. He claims they have been actively and entirely captured by feminist and Marxist ideologies.
And according to his framework, these captured institutions have systematically weaponized marriage, HR departments, and social media against men.
Right, and our job today as your guides is to impartially report on the architecture of Reicher's arguments. We aren't here to endorse his worldview or take a political stand.
No, not at all.
We are just here to help you unpack the evolutionary logic he uses, understand his historical timeline of how these institutions were supposedly captured, and examine the, frankly, extreme survival strategies he prescribes.
To really synthesize the core premise of this text, we have to understand Reicher's foundational axiom. Like, everything in the book rests on the belief that human beings are essentially walking, talking primates running on 200,000 years of evolutionary hardwire.
Right, the biological baseline.
Exactly. And his argument is that you simply cannot overwrite that Pleistocene-era biology with, like, a modern HR seminar or a sociology degree or some progressive legislative reform.
Just won't stick.
No. The book is structured as a triage manual. It is designed for men who feel they are bleeding out in a rigged system, offering them a blueprint to reclaim their legacy and protect their assets.
And the idea of trying to overwrite biology is actually a perfect place to start, because Reicher dedicates a massive portion of the beginning of the book to what he calls the myth of equality.
Oh yeah, he goes hard on this.
He makes the case that true egalitarianism in a romantic relationship isn't just difficult to achieve or socially complex. He argues it is a literal biological impossibility.
Right.
I was reading his breakdown of this, and it struck me as being very similar to a smartphone operating system.
How so?
Well, Reicher is essentially arguing that modern Western society is frantically trying to install a software patch of gender equality onto primate hardware that simply lacks the capacity to run the code.
Oh, I like that analogy.
And because the hardware rejects the patch, the system keeps crashing, which is what we see as skyrocketing divorce rates and relationship dissatisfaction.
That software analogy maps perfectly onto the data he chooses to highlight, actually. To prove that the hardware rejects the code, Reicher points to a very specific, highly publicized 2018 study out of Sweden.
Oh, the preschool one, right.
Yeah. So the Swedish government, which is arguably one of the most progressive, egalitarian states on the planet, poured millions of dollars into an initiative aimed at preschools.
Just massive funding.
Exactly. The goal was to socialize equality from the absolute ground up. They removed gendered language, they forced gender-neutral toys on the children, and they tried to engineer literally any innate gender differences out of the developmental process.
They basically tried to create a blank slate environment to prove that gender behaviors are entirely learned constructs.
Right. But according to the Uppsala University researchers that Riker cites, the experiment backfired in a way that perfectly supports his thesis.
Oh, it happened.
The researchers observed a phenomenon they termed spontaneous self-segregation.
Wait, spontaneous, like they just did it themselves?
Yes. Despite the gender-neutral environment and the intense socialization efforts by the teachers, the children naturally divided themselves. The boys still gravitated toward building structures, wrestling, and aggressive dominance-based play.
And the girls.
The girls spontaneously organized themselves around playing house, nurturing roles, and complex social communication. Yeah, Riker uses this as his foundational proof of concept. You cannot negotiate with primate hardware. The state spent millions trying to erase biology, and biology won before the kids even learned to read.
That is wild. And he compounds that psychological data with raw physical data, too. He brings in Harvard evolutionary biology research confirming that, on average, men possess 40 to 90% greater upper body strength than women.
Which is a massive disparity.
It is.
Yeah.
And he doesn't just throw that out as a fun trivia fact. He uses it to explain that our entire nervous system is calibrated for a world where that physical disparity meant the literal difference between life and death.
Exactly.
To Riker, this isn't some arbitrary social construct patriarchy invented. It is the result of brutal selective breeding. We are the descendants of the men who could crack a mammoth's skull or defend a perimeter against a rival tribe.
Which brings us to the core mechanism driving female behavior in Riker's framework, hypergamy.
Right, hypergamy 101.
As you mentioned, you guys in the audience are probably familiar with the term, but Riker's application of it relies heavily on David Buss's famous 37 culture study.
Well, I've seen that reference before.
Yeah, Buss demonstrated that across wildly different societies, from industrialized Western nations to remote hunter-gatherer tribes, female mate selection consistently prioritizes resources, status, dominance, and physical strength.
Universal traits.
Universally. The biological imperative for a woman is to seek upward mobility and align herself with the top of the male dominance hierarchy.
Because historically, aligning with a weak man meant you and your offspring starved or were killed.
Precisely. The evolutionary stakes were absolute. So Riker's takeaway is unapologetically blunt. He says a woman's biology does not want a partner in the modern egalitarian sense. She wants a captain.
A captain.
She wants a man whose competence and dominance allow her to feel secure.
This is where he introduces a concept that I think will resonate with a lot of guys who have tried to play by the modern rules. He calls it the beta bargain.
The beta bargain, yes.
It's this insidious idea that men are culturally tricked into trading their innate leadership for the promise of fairness and peace.
Right.
He tells this incredibly detailed, almost painful story about a Silicon Valley CEO. This guy had a massive exit from a startup. He was wealthy, but he wanted to be the ultimate modern progressive husband.
He bought into the software patch.
Totally. He intentionally stepped back from his next venture to support his wife's career. He took on 50% of the diaper changes, 50% of the cooking. He read all the egalitarian parenting blogs. He was doing it all by the new book.
And Riker uses this anecdote to illustrate the fatal flaw of the beta bargain. What was the CEO's reward for his progressive compliance?
I'm guessing not a happy anniversary.
Not even close. According to the book, his wife didn't feel gratitude. Her biology registered his domestic submission as weakness.
Oh, man.
She divorced him, initiated a brutal legal battle that stripped him of 70% of his remaining company stock, and within a year, she was engaged to a Colombian polo instructor.
A polo instructor. You can't make that up.
Right. A man who, in Riker's framing, offered zero domestic equity, but possessed overwhelming physical dominance and unapologetic masculine frame.
And Riker backs up that crazy anecdote with some really sobering Scandinavian data. He points to research showing that in households where men perform 80% or more of the domestic housework, they face a 92% higher divorce rate.
92%, that's staggering.
He coins the term core play to describe this. Men think that by doing the dishes and folding the laundry, They are earning desire and respect. But Riker argues that core play actually broadcasts desperation.
It backfires completely.
Yeah, he says that when a woman sees a man frantically trying to appease her through domestic labor, her hypergamic instincts categorize him as a subservient beta. She equates his fairness with weakness.
So to counteract this, Riker insists that a man must constantly charge what he calls the alpha premium to avoid paying the beta tax.
The 5% rule, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is codified in his 5% rule. The premise is that a man must tangibly improve his physical fitness, his financial portfolio, and his social status by 5% every single month.
That sounds exhausting.
It is a relentless doctrine of self-optimization. But Riker argues that the moment a man stagnates, the moment he stops improving and gets comfortable, he inadvertently triggers his partner's hypergamic reflex to start scanning the horizon for a biological upgrade.
Okay, I have to push back on this relentless evolutionary determinism. When I was going through his arguments, I kept thinking about history.
Okay, let's hear it.
If hypergamy is this constant, unbreakable firmware, how does Riker explain away the historical periods or the specific societies where egalitarianism actually did seem to work? Like, are we supposed to believe that every single culture throughout time operated on this ruthless dominance hierarchy?
It is a valid critique, and Riker actually anticipates it. He addresses the concept of historical egalitarianism by categorizing it as an illusion or, at best, a temporary anomaly that ultimately results in collapse.
A collapse. Give me an example.
Well, he dissects the Viking sagas, specifically the settlement established by Freydis Eiríksdóttir in Vinland. Modern sociologists often point to these early Norse settlements as bastions of proto-feminist equality, where women had significant rights and shared leadership.
Right, the whole shield maiden mythos.
Exactly. But Riker points out that Freydis' settlement dissolved in violence and chaos in less than 2 generations. He argues that the moment environmental pressure increased when resources became scarce and survival was threatened, the luxury of egalitarianism vanished.
Because things got real.
Right. As he puts it, starving people cannot eat progressive slogans.
Wow.
He even tackles the biological counterexamples, like bonobo monkeys. People always cite bonobos as these peaceful, matriarchal, egalitarian primates to prove that dominance hierarchies aren't inevitable.
Right, the make love not war monkeys.
Exactly. But Riker counters by noting that even in bonobo societies, they rely heavily on aggressive male alliances to defend their territorial borders from chimpanzees.
So they outsource the violence.
Basically, his ultimate synthesis is that history universally sides with strength. Any deviation into societal fairness is a temporary luxury funded by the surplus created by masculine dominance. When the surplus runs out, the hierarchy returns.
That is a dark, uncompromising view of history. But it perfectly sets up the next major pillar of his book. Because if our biological hardware fundamentally rejects equality, what happens when an entire civilization decides to build its legal framework around that very same rejected code?
And that's where the institutional capture comes in.
Right. Riker argues that because modern society decided to ignore these biological instincts, our legal systems, specifically family courts, didn't just become inefficient, they were intentionally redesigned to capitalize on female hypergamy. He calls this the divorce industrial complex.
He frames this transition as a deliberate, hostile institutional capture. To understand how we got here, Riker requires us to look at the history of marriage law, specifically contrasting modern statutes with 18th century coverture laws.
Let's unpack coverture because a lot of people just view it as antiquated oppression. How does Riker frame it?
Well, under the legal doctrine of coverture, a woman's legal rights and obligations were subsumed by those of her husband upon marriage. She could not own property, enter into contracts, or be sued in her own name.
Right, which modern historians view as textbook subjugation.
Yes. However, Riker argues that coverture was actually a perfectly balanced ledger of risk and authority. Because the husband absorbed all of his wife's legal identity, he also absorbed 100% of her financial and legal liabilities.
Why, really?
Yeah. If she accumulated debt, he went to debtor's prison. If she committed certain crimes, he was held legally responsible.
Oh, wow.
Riker's argument is that historical patriarchal authority was the necessary trade-off for carrying the absolute burden of provision, protection, and legal liability.
So you trade freedom for a complete shield against consequence.
Exactly. But Riker argues that the push for no-fault divorce in the 1970s completely severed that balance. He specifically points to figures like Gloria Allred and early feminist legal scholars, framing their legislative pushes not as a fight for liberation, but as a Trojan horse.
And Trojan horse.
Yes, because they dismantled the male authority of coverture, but they kept the male financial liability intact through alimony and asset division. Riker argues this created a system where women possess all the freedom of a modern individual, backed by the financial guarantees of a traditional patriarch.
And the statistics he uses to illustrate the fallout of this system are staggering. He points out that women initiate roughly 80% of all divorces.
80%.
That isn't a minor discrepancy. That is a systemic behavioral pattern. And he brings in data from the Rand Corporation to show what happens after the gavel falls. According to Rand, after a marital split, a man's standard of living plunges by 40%.
40% drop.
He is suddenly funding 2 households, paying legal fees, child support, and alimony on a single income. Meanwhile, the woman's standard of living actually rises by 15%.
It's wild.
Riker paints this not as a separation of incompatible lovers, but as a state-sanctioned wealth transfer scheme.
And the mechanism of that wealth transfer is what he calls the 7-year churn. This is one of the more cynical concepts in the book.
I was reading this part and just shaking my head.
Riker references demographic research, including data out of UCLA, which suggests that a significant percentage of female-initiated divorces are timed with surgical, strategic precision.
Strategic precision.
Yeah. In states where hitting the 10-year mark of a marriage triggers permanent lifetime alimony, family lawyers see a massive spike in women filing for divorce right at year 9.
Just before the deadline.
Or they time the divorce to perfectly coincide with a man's peak earning years, typically between ages 45 and 55. Riker argues that this isn't impulsive unhappiness or falling out of love. He calls it financial arbitrage.
Financial arbitrage.
It is hypergamy, utilizing the legal system to extract maximum resources before monkey branching to the next phase of life.
When I was reading the breakdown of the family court system, it honestly felt like he was describing a rigged casino.
That's a great way to put it.
Imagine sitting down at a blackjack table, where the house, which in this scenario is the state colluding with the ex-wife, not only controls the deck, but gets to change the rules of the game mid-hand.
Right.
And the man is just sitting there bleeding chips, unable to leave the table. But here is the obvious counter-argument that most guys would bring up. What about prenuptial agreements? Doesn't a solid, ironclad prenup, drafted by a good lawyer, level the playing field and bypass the rigged casino?
You would think so, but Riker aggressively dismantles the myth of the prenup. He mockingly calls them napkins in a hurricane.
Napkins in a hurricane.
He doesn't just offer an opinion on this either. He references a 2023 Forbes expose on a growing legal sub-industry of prenup killers.
Prenup killers.
These are high-priced litigators who specialize exclusively in torpedoing prenuptial contracts. They use incredibly vague, subjective legal avenues to invalidate the agreements, claiming the wife signed under emotional coercion, or that she was experiencing mental distress at the time of signing.
He also points to legislative shifts, right?
Yep.
Like New York's Economic Equity Act.
Yes, he claims that pieces of legislation like the Economic Equity Act essentially give family court judges the unilateral power to rewrite or completely throw out prenups based on subjective power dynamics.
So the judge just decides.
Exactly. If a judge looks at the situation and decides that the lifestyle the wife has grown accustomed to during the marriage is threatened by the terms of the prenup, the contract is tossed in the shredder. Riker's underlying thesis here is that family courts do not operate on the cold, hard logic of contract law.
They operate on emotion.
He calls them empathy engines, driven by an innate societal maternal bias that will always prioritize the financial comfort of the woman over the contractual rights of the man.
Okay, so if the legal casino is completely rigged and the prenups are just napkins in a hurricane, does Riker offer any actual legal mechanism within the system that works? Is there a specific type of trust or a certain state jurisdiction he recommends, or is his advice literally just to hide from the government?
This is a vital question because it reveals Riker's ultimate philosophy on institutions. He views the modern legal system as fundamentally, irreversibly adversarial and predatory toward men.
So you can't work with them.
No, you cannot negotiate with a predator. He believes exclusively in financial OPSEC operational security. His primary, overarching solution to the divorce industrial complex is what he calls the Black Knight Protocol. And the protocol is very simple. Never marry, never cohabitate, deny the state jurisdiction over your relationship.
The ultimate boycott.
Precisely. However, he acknowledges that some men are already entangled or simply refuse to walk the path of the Black Knight. For those men, his financial strategies read like an espionage manual for a rogue intelligence agent.
It really does.
He advises obtaining dual citizenship in non-extradition countries to intentionally complicate custody and alimony jurisdictions. He cites a case study of a former Marine who leveraged an Okinawa birth certificate to completely paralyze a California court's ability to garnish his assets.
He also goes deep into asset concealment. He recommends establishing offshore trusts in jurisdictions like Belize or the Cook Islands, which historically ignore U.S. family court subpoenas.
Right.
But the crypto stuff is where it gets really wild. He specifically tells guys to avoid Bitcoin and use Monero.
Yes, the distinction between Bitcoin and Monero is crucial to his OPSEC strategy. Bitcoin operates on a public ledger. If a forensic accountant hired by her divorce attorney subpoenas a cryptocurrency exchange, they can trace the Bitcoin right back to the husband's wallet.
It's totally visible.
But Monero, however, utilizes ring signatures and stealth addresses. It obscures the sender, the receiver, and the amount transacted. It is a cryptographic black hole. Riker also advocates for cold storage hardware wallets or even converting fiat currency into physical gold coins.
And hiding those gold coins inside the metal tubing of a Peloton bike.
Yes.
I read that and couldn't believe how specific it was. But it highlights his point. He insists that financial transparency in a modern marriage is a fatal error. He argues that sharing your bank statements with your wife is essentially a Trojan horse, providing her with real-time data on your liquidation value for when her hypergamic instincts inevitably kick in.
It is extreme, but it perfectly aligns with his worldview. If the institutions are captured, you have to operate outside of them.
So if the legal institution of marriage is a bear trap just waiting to snap shut, Riker argues that the day-to-day relationship itself becomes a constant tactical battlefield.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if a woman is biologically wired to look for an upgrade, and the courts are financially incentivizing her to pull the trigger, a man has to constantly defend his frame. And the front lines of this daily war, the girls' night out.
Riker does not mince words when analyzing female social dynamics here. He categorizes the girls' night out not as harmless fun or female bonding, but as auditions for your replacement. To substantiate this, he cites a 2022 study by the Institute of Marriage Dynamics, which found that a staggering 68% of these outings function primarily as mate auditioning hubs.
68%.
He details a particularly grim anecdote about a welder from Ohio. This guy's wife told him she desperately needed a self-care night with the girls to decompress from motherhood.
Okay, sounds normal enough.
Right. He stayed home with the kids, but eventually noticed her location sharing was still on. He tracked her phone, expecting to see her at a spa or a quiet restaurant.
Where was she?
Instead, he found her at a loud sports bar 2 blocks away from the apartment of a guy she worked with, who she constantly told him not to worry about.
Oh, man. Which perfectly tees up Riker's concept of the hemline hypothesis. I thought this was one of the most controversial, yet fascinating metrics he introduces.
The hemline hypothesis proposes a direct, observable correlation between a woman's respect for her partner and her wardrobe choices when she leaves the house without him.
Like a sliding scale.
Literally. Riker argues that you can measure her hypergamic intent by the length of her skirt. Every inch shorter the skirt gets, her respect for her man at home drops proportionally.
He takes no prisoners with this stuff.
He flat out rejects the modern feminist narrative that women dress provocatively for themselves or to feel empowered. He argues that the Spanx, the stilettos, the layered contour makeup, and the plunging necklines are premeditated mate baiting. They are broadcasting sexual availability to the dominance hierarchy.
And he couples that with a time metric, too. He points to behavioral studies showing that covert mate testing behavior quadruples when a woman is out past the 180-minute mark.
3 hours.
3 hours. If she is out at a club or a bar past 3 hours, Riker says the threat level escalates to red. Her inhibitions drop, alcohol alters her risk assessment, and her hypergamy takes the wheel. It's like living through a corporate audit. Riker suggests that a man's partner is an endless, unannounced auditor, constantly probing the perimeter for cracks in his alpha status. And he makes it clear that this auditing isn't restricted to nightclubs. He argues the modern corporate workplace is an absolute minefield of emotional affairs.
The workplace analysis is where Riker brilliantly connects primate biology to modern corporate environments. He cites an Oxford sociological study revealing that 68% of women admit to sharing intimate marital complaints with male coworkers.
68% again.
Now, modern HR might label this as venting to a work husband, but Riker looks at the neuroscience. He pairs the Oxford data with UCLA research demonstrating that just a 15-minute deep talk with a male stranger or acquaintance boosts a woman's oxytocin levels by 30%.
Oxytocin being the bonding hormone, the exact same neurotransmitter that floods a mother's brain when she nurses a newborn.
Exactly. It creates profound neurological attachment. Riker argues that biology does not give a single damn about HR boundaries or corporate ethics. That work husband who listens to her complain about you not doing the dishes,
He's the enemy.
he is biologically courting her using neurotransmitter warfare. Every single time she vents to him, her brain releases oxytocin, literally etching the coworker's face and voice into her hippocampus alongside feelings of comfort and validation. It is the beginning of the end.
And then you throw smartphones into the mix, and it's like pouring gasoline on a fire. Riker dedicates a lot of time to social media, which he crowns the cuckoldry catalyst.
He views platforms like Instagram and TikTok as the most ruthlessly efficient cuckoldry delivery systems ever invented in human history.
That's a strong statement.
To explain why they are so dangerous, he references a study from Nature Neuroscience that compared the dopamine hit a person receives from an Instagram notification to the neurological spike caused by a line of cocaine. It is highly addictive validation. And he maps out exactly how this destroys marriages through a concept he calls the infidelity funnel.
The infidelity funnel is terrifyingly logical. I want to walk through this because I think every guy listening has seen this play out.
Oh, for sure.
Step one is the top of the funnel likes. She posts a mildly provocative selfie, and the algorithm delivers hundreds of likes from orbiters. Step two, validation in the comments. The fire emojis, the "you look amazing" comments.
Right, feeding the ego.
Step three, the interaction moves out of the public square and into the DMs, where the emotional affair begins under the guise of casual chatting. And step four, the bottom of the funnel, physical betrayal.
And the transition from digital to physical happens faster than most men realize. Riker tells a story about a husband who bought his wife a Peloton bike for her birthday, thinking he was supporting her fitness goals.
Famous Peloton again.
Yeah. Within 3 weeks, she had joined a Hot Mom Spin Club group on Instagram. That group led to her following a fitness trainer, which led to her sliding into his DMs for form advice, which rapidly spiraled into a full-blown physical affair.
Unbelievable.
Riker argues that women use these digital platforms to run a perpetual validation inflation cycle. Because of the algorithm, an average woman suddenly has access to the attention of top-tier men she would never encounter in her physical life. She is constantly auditing her replaceability on a global market.
But the auditing doesn't just happen online or at work. Riker points out that she audits the man directly, to his face, every single day, through what he calls fitness tests.
A fitness test, in Riker's vernacular, is a covert psychological probe designed to gauge a man's emotional weakness and stability. When she makes a passive-aggressive comment about his ambition, or suddenly throws a tantrum over something trivial, or compares him to another man, she's not actually looking for a logical conversation.
It's a trap.
It is a Darwinian pop quiz. She is testing the structural integrity of his frame.
Like when she casually mentions, "Hey, Brad from accounting just bought a new Porsche 911. She doesn't care about the Porsche. She wants to see if you get insecure about your Honda Civic.
Precisely. And Riker outlines strict protocols for surviving these tests. He advises men to deploy the 3-second rule. When she throws a shit test at you, you have exactly 3 seconds to respond with humor, absolute indifference, or overwhelming dominance.
3 seconds. That's tight.
If you pause, if you get visibly defensive, or worse, if you try to logically explain to her why you don't have a Porsche, you fail the test. Her hypergamy registers your defensiveness as weakness.
He gives guys a framework to handle this called the 4Ds: detach emotionally. Delay your response, distract your focus, and dominate the frame.
Yes.
He gives a classic example. A man's wife comes out of the bedroom and asks the ultimate trap question. Does this dress make me look fat? The husband, using the 4Ds, doesn't panic or reassure her. He just looks at her, smirks, and says, "No, but my face will, if you keep asking me that question."
It is bold, but it illustrates his point. Riker claims that humor disarms the trap, and playful dominance secures her respect. It proves you aren't afraid of her moods.
I understand the mechanics of it, but I really want to pressure test the reality of living like this.
No head.
Because if a man takes this advice seriously, if he is constantly playing defense, timing his responses to a 3-second window, monitoring the exact length of her skirts, tracking the 180-minute mark when she goes out, constantly assuming her coworkers are waging neurotransmitter warfare against him.
It sounds like a lot.
At what point does Riker admit that the relationship simply isn't worth the immense psychological exhaustion?
That is the crux of understanding Riker's philosophy. What is truly fascinating and perhaps unsettling is that Riker completely rejects the premise that this lifestyle is exhausting.
Wait, really? He doesn't think it's exhausting.
He does not view it as playing defense. In his worldview, this is simply the act of maintaining frame, and it is the natural default state of male existence. He argues that anxiety only exists when there is a gap between reality and expectation. If a man expects his wife to be static, loyal partner who never looks at another man, he will be exhausted by her constant testing. But if he accepts the evolutionary reality that hypergamy never sleeps, the anxiety vanishes.
So you just accept that gravity exists and you stop being mad when things fall.
Exactly. Riker uses the metaphor of an oak tree in a storm. If you view yourself as an unshakable oak and you view her emotional fluctuations and fitness tests simply as the wind, you don't fight the wind, you just stand firm. It is only exhausting if you try to control the wind.
That makes sense within his framework, but it leads to a massive collision with modern culture. Because if the goal is to be the unshakable oak tree, what happens when every movie, every HR seminar, and every couples therapist tells the man to do the exact opposite?
That's where things get dangerous.
What happens when society demands that the oak tree bend, open up, and cry? This takes us into one of the most blistering critiques in the book, The Empathy Trap. Riker goes absolutely scorched earth on the modern push for male vulnerability.
He dismantles it completely. Riker views the cultural demand for male vulnerability not as progress, but as a catastrophic trap that accelerates the very relationship audits we were just analyzing.
The vulnerability industrial complex, he calls it.
He argues it is a multi-billion-dollar scam that explicitly teaches men to dismantle their stoic frame and weep, only to have those exact tears weaponized against them by the women who demanded they open up in the first place.
I visualized his argument like the story of the Trojan horse. Society, the media, and modern therapists stand outside the gates of a man's mind, promising him that if he just opens the gates and brings this wooden horse of vulnerability inside, he will finally experience peace, deep intimacy, and true connection.
Right.
But Riker is screaming from the walls that the moment you pull that horse inside, the Greek soldiers, which in this metaphor are her hypergamic instincts of disgust, will leap out in the middle of the night and burn your relationship to the ground.
And he marshals some very uncomfortable data to support that metaphor. He points to a comprehensive study out of the University of Toronto which examined how emotional displays impact perceived status.
What did they find?
The researchers found that men who show visible emotion or cry at work are rated 40% less competent by their peers and managers than men who remain stoic.
40%.
Riker argues that this dynamic isn't just limited to office politics, it is woven into female nature. He cites peer research showing that 61% of women admit to losing sexual and romantic interest in partners who frequently overshare their fears and insecurities.
That's brutal.
To Riker, a woman's hypergamic hardwiring simply lacks the capacity to compute male vulnerability as anything other than weakness. It fundamentally short-circuits her attraction algorithms.
The anecdotes he provides here are absolutely brutal. He tells the story of a guy named Mike. Mike was facing massive layoffs at his tech company. He was stressed out of his mind, and he texted his girlfriend a very simple, honest message. I'm really struggling right now.
A totally normal thing to say, you'd think.
Right. According to the modern script, she should have rushed over to comfort him. Instead, she ghosted him for 2 days. When he finally confronted her about it, she coldly told him, "I need a man who doesn't need me."
Ouch.
He shares another story about a Fortune 500 CEO who broke down in tears about investor pressure during an expensive couples retreat. He thought he was building intimacy. 6 months later, his fiancée broke off the engagement and married his COO, a guy whose literal office motto was, "I'll sleep when I'm dead."
And the repercussions aren't just romantic, they are deeply legal. Riker points to statistics from the National Center for Men, claiming that 67% of divorced men reported that the intimate fears and vulnerabilities they shared with their wives were later weaponized against them in family court.
Weaponized.
Riker issues a stark warning to his readers. He says your tears are not sacred, they are not building intimacy. They are quite literally legal discovery material that she is cataloging for her divorce attorney to prove you are unstable and unfit for custody.
So what is the macro level effect of this cultural gaslighting? Because we hear constantly about the male mental health crisis, and the mainstream solution is always, men need to talk more.
Riker addresses the mental health crisis by pointing to a largely ignored 2019 report from the California Commission on Men and Boys. He highlights a stunning correlation. States that are heavily progressive states that aggressively push gender equity, dismantle traditional masculinity, and mandate male emotional vulnerability in schools and institutions.
Yeah.
They have male suicide rates 2.3 times higher than traditional conservative states that still culturally enforce stoicism.
2.3 times higher. That's insane.
Raker's conclusion is damning. He argues that forcing men to process emotions like women doesn't save their lives. It drives them to the brink of despair.
Because they're being punished for
Yeah.
doing exactly what they were told to do. He calls this the catch-22, or the Disneyland dad dilemma.
Yes, the catch-22 perfectly encapsulates the modern male trap. Men are constantly shamed by society for being stoic. They are branded as emotionally unavailable or toxic. But the moment they open up, they are punished with a loss of sexual attraction from their wives or legal ruin in family court.
It's a no-win situation.
And it extends to parenting. If a divorced dad tries to be fun and emotionally open to connect with his kids on the weekends, the courts label him a Disneyland dad who is undermining the mother's strict authority. But if he enforces discipline and focuses on their homework, he is labeled an emotional, distant patriarch. He is damned if he does and legally dead if he doesn't.
So what is his prescription for this absolute nightmare of a situation?
Riker prescribes a tactical retreat into absolute stoicism, which he brands as Grey Rock 2.0 or the Stone-Face Protocol.
The Stone-Face Protocol.
He advises men to practice strategic emotional compartmentalization. You must build a mental Fort Knox. You share only what explicitly serves your mission and maintains your frame. When your partner pushes you to open up or demands to know why you are stressed, Riker says you look her in the eye and say, 3 words, I'll handle it.
Just I'll handle it.
He even assigns homework to the reader. He says to practice staring dead-eyed into a bathroom mirror for 5 minutes a day to master an expression of complete, impenetrable stoicism, so that when a crisis hits, your face betrays absolutely nothing.
Okay, I have to stop and really challenge this because this feels like a recipe for a heart attack.
It's definitely extreme.
Does Riker make any distinction at all between a guy venting about a momentary frustration like a flat tire or an annoying boss versus a man experiencing actual profound trauma like the death of a parent or clinical depression, or is literally every single manifestation of male emotion viewed as a fatal liability?
If you read the text closely and take his evolutionary framework to its logical conclusion, Riker makes absolutely no distinction between annoyance and profound trauma.
None at all.
None. He synthesizes female hypergamy as a ruthless survival mechanism that demands an unbreakable provider and protector. Therefore, all public male pain, whether it is a temporary layoff, the tragic loss of a child, or a battle with cancer, is viewed as a liability that instantly triggers her instinct to flee the sinking ship.
Wow.
According to Riker, a woman's biology cannot afford to carry a broken man. The only place Riker permits a man to safely process trauma is within a closed circle of trusted male brothers, which is a core part of his survival strategy we will get to shortly. But he is adamant. You never, under any circumstances, bleed on your romantic partner.
Wow. It is bleak, but it is internally consistent with his rules.
Sure.
Now, let's say a guy actually pulls this off. Let's say he builds this emotional Fort Knox, he maintains his frame, and he protects his assets. Is he safe?
Not according to Riker.
Right. According to the latter half of the book, no. Riker argues that once society realizes it can't break you through the empathy trap, it throws a different set of societal traps at you, specifically targeting how we structure our modern lives. He calls these the modern illusions. And the first illusion he targets is the rising trend of polyamory.
Riker despises the polyamory movement. He frames ethical non-monogamy and open marriages not as progressive enlightenment, but as feminist gaslighting for cucks.
He does not hold back.
He argues that polyamory is nothing more than a rigged casino designed specifically to turbocharge a woman's dual sexual strategy.
And for those who might need a refresher, how does Riker define the dual sexual strategy in this context?
The dual sexual strategy is the evolutionary concept that women have 2 conflicting biological imperatives. On one hand, they seek a dependable beta male provider who will stick around, pay the mortgage, and offer security for her offspring. On the other hand, they crave the raw genetic superiority, danger, and excitement of an alpha male.
So monogamy forces a choice.
Monogamy forces a compromise. But Riker argues that polyamory is a hack. It allows a woman to securely lock down the beta provider's paycheck, emotional support, and domestic labor, while simultaneously being granted a hall pass to go out and harvest the alpha's genes and sexual thrill, all while the beta provider smiles and calls it ethical.
It's like a corporate merger from hell. You have the man supplying all the capital, all the infrastructure, paying all the overhead, and taking on all the risk. But in this open marriage scenario, the woman retains 100% of the voting rights and can bring in outside executive partners to use the facilities whenever she wants.
Perfect analogy.
It is a catastrophically bad deal for the guy. And Riker brings some heavy data to back up how destructive this is.
He backs it up comprehensively. He cites data from the Kinsey Institute stating that 84% of couples who open their relationship to have a threesome or explore polyamory develop permanent, irreparable trust fractures.
84%.
He refers to this as the Costco sample effect. Once a woman is given a free, consequence-free taste of upgraded alpha inventory, convincing her to return exclusively to the original beta brand is biologically impossible.
The Costco sample effect, that is brutal.
He also points to American Psychological Association data claiming that 81% of men who are strong-armed into these open arrangements develop severe clinical depression. Furthermore, women initiate 92% of divorces in open marriages compared to the standard 69 to 80% in traditional ones.
So it actually accelerates the divorce.
To Riker, the translation is simple. When she sits you down and asks to open the marriage, she is not negotiating. She is actively auditioning your replacements, and she wants you to pay the rent while she does it.
His advice for handling that conversation is incredibly blunt. He says the moment the words open marriage leave her mouth, you issue an immediate ultimatum. Choose right now. It is us, or it is your roster. If it's the roster, I will start packing your bags.
No hesitation.
Which brings us to the second modern illusion he dismantles, the motherhood paradox. This is where he takes direct aim at corporate feminism's have-it-all narrative.
The motherhood paradox is a crucial element of his argument regarding how modern institutions actively betray human biology. Riker leans on a 2020 study from the Journal of Endocrinology, which demonstrates that a woman's testosterone levels drop by roughly 50% after childbirth.
50%, that's a huge drop.
Her biological hardwiring is literally altering her brain chemistry, screaming at her to slow down, to nurture, and to bond intensely with her infant. Yet the modern paradigm of corporate feminism demands she ignore her hormones. It pushes her to pump breast milk in a bathroom stall, return to the boardroom after 6 weeks, climb the corporate ladder, and outsource her innate maternal instincts to minimum wage daycare workers.
And he paints the daycare industry not just as an outsourcing of labor, but as an absolute hotbed for infidelity. He calls 5:00 p.m. the betrayal window.
Yes, the betrayal window. He uses a Match.com survey claiming that 34% of emotional affairs actually spark at daycare centers or school drop-offs.
At daycare.
He describes the afternoon pickup line as the new hyper-local dating app. You have exhausted mothers in Lululemon leggings, stressed out from corporate jobs, suddenly flooded with competitive mating signals from other parents.
It sounds like a reality show.
He even brings in data from the Endocrine Society stating that women who utilize daycare for 40-plus hours a week maintain 17% higher testosterone levels than stay-at-home mothers. This means their competitive, aggressive, mate-seeking signals are kept in artificial overdrive, rather than settling into the nurturing baseline nature intended.
He actually tells a story about a guy who got suspicious of his wife's new baby yoga classes. The guy slips an Apple AirTag into the lining of the diaper bag and tracks his wife to a Hilton hotel 2 towns over.
Unbelievable.
It is wild stuff. But here is the massive contradiction I see in Riker's logic, and I want you to explain how he squares this circle. Throughout the entire book, he paints women as these ruthless, hypergamous predators, constantly calculating your liquidation value and looking for a taller, richer guy to monkey branch to.
Right.
But in this section, he simultaneously claims that their deepest, truest biological desire is to just stay home, bake sourdough bread, and nurture their babies.
Yeah.
How can they be cold-blooded apex predators and nurturing trad wives at the same time?
It absolutely appears to be a contradiction, but Riker reconciles it brilliantly through his lens of male leadership and environmental security. He does not believe these two states are mutually exclusive. He believes one is a reaction to the other.
Okay, unpack that.
Riker theorizes that a woman's biology ultimately craves a strong, unyielding alpha leader who can provide a perimeter of absolute security. When she has that security, she can relax into her nurturing maternal instincts.
Ah, I see.
However, when that masculine leadership is absent, when the man is a compliant, subservient beta, She feels environmentally unsafe. Her hypergamy isn't malicious. It kicks in as an anxiety-driven survival mechanism. She looks for an upgrade because her primal brain tells her the current protector cannot defend the tribe.
So it's a symptom of feeling unprotected.
Therefore, the traditional countermove he advocates to solve this is a return to single-income households and homeschooling.
He refers to homeschooling as evolutionary triage.
Exactly. He cites data from the Institute for Family Studies stating that homeschooling mothers report triple the weekly sex frequency of their career-oriented counterparts.
Trouble.
Riker argues that by removing a woman from the competitive, testosterone-fueled corporate world, you eliminate the affair risks of the workplace and the daycare center, and you allow her biology to align with her environment. He views corporate climbing for women as relationship malware that corrupts their natural operating system.
So we have thoroughly mapped the minefield. We have seen how Riker believes the legal institutions are captured, how the culture sets empathy traps, and how modern marriage structures are designed to fail. This brings us to the grand finale of the book, which doesn't just diagnose the problem, but offers a radical cure.
The Alpha Blueprint.
We are talking about the Alpha Blueprint. This is Riker's actionable, highly aggressive strategy for men to reclaim their frame, their legacy, and their absolute dominion. Let's unpack the tools in this blueprint. The first one blew my mind because it is so counterintuitive, the sexual strike.
Riker completely flips the conventional script on marital intimacy. The standard narrative is that men are always pursuing sex, and when they face a dead bedroom, they complain, beg, or seek therapy.
Right.
Riker argues that pursuing sex from a reluctant partner is beta behavior that only increases her disgust. Instead, he instructs men to weaponize celibacy.
Weaponize celibacy.
A man should abruptly and completely withdraw his sexual attention and physical validation. He backs this up with kinemetrics data suggesting an incredible phenomenon. While women initiate roughly 73% of all divorces overall, that number plummets to just 12% in relationships where the man strictly controls the intimacy schedule.
He calls this triggering responsive desire through the deployment of absolute scarcity. If you are always available, your value is zero.
Exactly.
He shares an anecdote about a guy who was getting rejected constantly. Instead of complaining, he just stopped trying. He started working out twice a day, focusing on his business, and completely ignoring his wife sexually. By day 15 of the strike, the dynamic flipped.
She panicked.
His wife panicked, canceled an expensive girls' trip to Cabo, and started cooking his meals and initiating intimacy. The psychology here is that your sudden absence isn't viewed as neglect. It creates primal dread. It forces her to realize she might be losing her grip on you.
Next, in the Alpha Blueprint, is a concept crucial for surviving the systemic traps we discussed earlier, the Red Pill Brotherhood. Riker insists that a man simply cannot survive this captured legal and social system as a lone wolf.
You need an alliance.
He requires deep, highly vetted male alliances. He highlights a group called the Detroit Brotherhood as a prime example. This is a network of men who use encrypted signal chats to share tactical information, pool financial resources to hire private investigators when one of them suspects infidelity, and even provide ironclad alibis for each other.
He cites a statistic saying that men who have 3 or more tight-knit, fiercely loyal male friends face a 63% lower risk of being ambushed by a sudden divorce. Because, as Riker puts it, hypergamy hates witnesses.
Oh, absolutely.
If a woman is going to monkey branch and invent a narrative of emotional abuse to justify it to the family court, a man needs a literal phalanx of brothers who can testify to his character and destroy her narrative. But he specifically warns guys to avoid yoga men, or guys who he says will simp for your wife and take her side in a dispute. You need men who are loyal to you, not your marriage.
Which leads directly into his strategy for controlling the environment of the marriage itself, media reprogramming. Riker argues that modern entertainment is not passive art, it is active behavioral conditioning.
Like brainwashing.
Shows like Bridgerton, Sex Education, or even seemingly harmless sitcoms like Modern Family are explicitly engineered to condition women. They either set impossible expectations of alpha billionaire romance, or they portray beta provider husbands as bumbling, incompetent punchlines.
It's constant psychological warfare in the living room. He brings up a UCLA study that found couples who binge-watch reality TV together fight 2.5 times more often than couples who don't. He says every single episode of The Kardashians is a masterclass in hypergamic escalation.
So his solution is radical.
The man must control the remote. He tells guys to literally log in and delete her HBO Max and Netflix profiles. You swap out the rom-coms and reality trash for Mythbusters, John Wick, or long-form Jordan Peterson lectures.
Just completely change the inputs.
He claims that controlling the media intake slowly rewires her subconscious expectations of reality. He even promises that replacing The View with Joe Rogan debates will eventually make her problematic feminist scowls morph into genuine attraction for masculine logic.
Which brings us to perhaps the most controversial, paranoid, and legally fraught tactic in the entire book, the legacy lockdown.
Oh, this part was wild.
Riker advises extreme, almost dystopian measures to fight the threat of paternity fraud. He points to international data, specifically claiming that Brazil has discovered a 15% paternity fraud rate in certain demographics.
15% is terrifying.
To Riker, a man's legacy isn't his stock portfolio. It is his unbroken bloodline. And to secure it, he advocates for mandatory, non-negotiable DNA testing at the birth of every child.
And if she refuses, or if you don't want to start a war in the delivery room, he introduces covert methods. He talks about tools called smart soothers, which are basically pacifiers secretly equipped with DNA gathering swabs.
Guys are secretly swabbing their own children's saliva to mail off to labs just to make sure they aren't raising another man's genetic offspring.
He tells this insane story of a guy who was so paranoid, he hired a fake delivery company. He had a guy hide a DNA swab kit inside a massive flower arrangement from Petals and Stems LLC just to bust his wife's affair and secure his legal standing before she could file for child support. It is intense, James Bond level paranoia.
And to protect that verified legacy, Riker insists a man must project constant, undeniable physical dominance through the alpha body and voice. He uses CDC data indicating that obese men are divorced at triple the rate of physically fit men within the first 5 years of marriage.
Triple the rate?
He introduces a concept called the abs threshold theory. Riker posits that when a man is lean enough that his abdominal V-cut is visibly pronounced, it acts as a fidelity force field.
A fidelity force field.
Her primal survival instincts register him as an apex predator, completely overriding her impulse to branch swing.
He even targets vocal cords. He references a Stanford phonetics study proving that a deeper male voice, specifically dropping your vocal register by 12 hertz triggers an 18% higher rate of subconscious compliance in women. He's telling men to literally speak slower, deeper, and from the chest to hack her neurology.
All of this physical, financial, and psychological dominance culminates in the final, overarching philosophy of blueprint, the unapologetic patriarch. Riker advocates for the implementation of what he calls the Mike Doctrine.
The Mike Doctrine.
This means a man must rule his household using clear, unapologetic, declarative mission statements. You do not ask for consensus. You say, I have decided this is what is best for us, rather than I'll try to do better. He points to Stanford research showing that children raised in firmly patriarchal, high-structure homes score 18% higher in metrics of grit and resilience.
He basically wants the man to completely transform into the benevolent dictator of his own micronation. The household is his sovereign territory. But looking at the totality of this blueprint, I have to ask you, does the text ever stop to address the immense, crushing psychological toll of living like this?
It's a lot to carry.
Think about what he is asking a man to do.
Yeah.
You have to be this unyielding, stoic titan 24 hours a day. You are constantly checking her phone, tracking your location, monitoring the length of her skirts, lifting weights twice a day, dropping your voice 12 hertz, hiding gold in your Peloton, and never, ever showing a moment of weakness. Does Riker truly believe the dominance dividend, the respect and sex you supposedly get in return, makes that level of paranoia effortless?
It is the most profound question you can ask about this ideology, and the answer is illuminating. The text does not frame this lifestyle as a burden.
Not a burden.
Riker explains that while executing the Alpha Blueprint requires absolute ruthless discipline, he views this not as a psychological toll, but as the only natural, stress-free state of existence for a man. He contrasts the effort required to maintain this alpha frame with the alternative. He asks the reader to weigh the discipline of the gym and the strictness of frame against the misery, the bankruptcy, and the suicidal ideation of paying the beta tax in a rigged family court system. The Conrad Riker, the paranoia, the emotional isolation, and the relentless discipline are not a burden. They are simply the necessary price of male sovereignty in a hostile world.
That is a hell of a summary. So to bring this massive, intense manual into focus, She's Not Yours, by Conrad Riker, is a radical, unapologetic rejection of every modern relationship norm we've been taught. It completely replaces the concepts of compromise, communication, and vulnerability with absolute, unwavering dominance, biological determinism, and financial OPSE.
Precisely. Riker's final diagnosis is that the institutions are captured, human biology is permanently fixed, and the only viable escape route for a man is to enforce a strict evolutionary hierarchy within the borders of his own life.
Which leaves me with a final provocative thought for you, our listener, to mull over as we wrap this up. If society's institutions, the schools, the courts, the media, have shifted as drastically far away from our biological hardwiring as Riker claims, what exactly happens to the next generation of boys?
It's a scary thought.
If they are raised entirely within this progressive public school system, molded by modern HR departments, and saturated in the media landscapes Riker is trying to dismantle, will they even possess the vocabulary to understand this alpha blueprint? Or will the hardware eventually, tragically, just accept the software patch, erasing the patriarch entirely?
It is a chilling question, and it is exactly the kind of deep critical thinking this text is designed to provoke in its readers.
Absolutely. And remember, we have only scratched the surface today. To truly grasp the tactical depth of these strategies, the granular statistics, and the intense real-world anecdotes we discussed, you need to dive into the source material for yourself. Do not wait. Check out Amazon Kindle and Google Playbooks to get your copy of the ebook today. And make sure to follow the author, at Conrad Riker, at Substack, to stay completely up to date on his latest research.
The full manual provides exponentially more detail on the offshore legal structures, the crypto OPSCC, and the psychological frameworks we explored.
It certainly does. Thank you for joining us in the murky diagnostic waters today. We didn't find a clean X-ray, but we certainly mapped the minefield of modern dynamics. Don't forget to like and subscribe to The Deep Dive, and we will see you next time as we continue to unpack the controversial ideas shaping our reality. Stay curious.